Jason Kelce didn't wear the mummer's costume at his press conference on Thursday, but it kind of felt like he was in it. I mean, this guy is already an all-timer, and then he goes out and has one of the more noteworthy and memorable press conferences we've ever seen.
Yeah, it was right up there with for who, for what, and sconces, but in a positive way. And you never know when those are coming. We didn't know when we got to the interview tent that we were going to talk to Jason Kelce. He was the last player they brought out, and it was quite a performance. He's the most thoughtful guy I maybe I've ever been around. There's a few guys on that level, a few other guys in 35 years. But he just, it's so funny because you ask him a question and he'll sit there and you can just see like the wheels spinning. He'll be like, yeah. And then poetry comes out. I mean, the guy's William freaking Shakespeare when he starts talking. And today it was just a pleasure listening to him talk and just the thoughtfulness of why some players make it here and some don't. A topic that, I think every Eagles fan, Philadelphia sports fan has lobbied back and forth at a bar or in your den during a game or watching a Sixers game with one notable guy missing. It was really extraordinary this morning.
Yeah, it's been a big topic, especially in this last week. So we'll kind of get into what Kelce said. I should mention this is the Eagle Eye podcast presented by Nissan. Reuben, Frank, Dave, Zangaro. We're already off and running here, but we have a lot to get to. We want to talk about what Kelce said. Dallas Goedert off the COVID list, a few other injury updates. Ray Didinger will join us in just a little bit to talk about the Bucs game, look ahead to the Raiders. And then at the end, I figured it would be fun to toss around just some of the more quotable Philadelphia athletes we've had the pleasure of covering. You certainly have a longer list than I do, but we'll go through some of those guys. But we wanted to start with Kelce because, like you mentioned,
Tommy Thompson, Al Wister.
Thanks. It wasn't – we didn't know we were going to talk to him. He didn't know he was going to be asked a question that would lead him down this road. And all of a sudden you have one of these moments where we're all looking around like, wow, this is really insightful. And we don't normally play audio on the pod, but we feel like this is worth it. So let's take a listen to what Jason Kelce had to say to that.
This city really appreciates accountability, appreciates people being very honest, real, emotionally invested, caring. I think there's a lot of people that say it's a hard place to play. I think it's pretty easy, to be honest with you. You just go out there, play hard. You want to be loved in the city as a baseball player, run to first base. They're going to love you. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, if you go up here and make a bunch of excuses, you come up here and try and lie to them and act like they don't know what they're talking about, which sometimes they don't, but that's when you really when you act that way, or when you aren't accountable if you're making mistakes or you're not getting better or anything like that, they're going to crush you. And that's most of the guys that I see, that everybody's going to get crushed at some point. Everybody's going to go through a downturn or be struggling, right? And at all times, the city's going to keep you accountable to be doing your job and performing. But if you stick to it and you fight through it and you get better and everything like that, they'll respect the hell out of you. Especially if you fight, even if you're struggling and you're fighting and you're really trying, they're still going to respect you. And that's what I think most guys miss. I think that I really don't think this is a hard place to play at all, to be honest with you. I think a hard place to play is, I don't want to, I think it'd be miserable to play in a place like Jacksonville where nobody cares. So,
I mean, that's great stuff, Rube. I mean, that's an all-time couple of answers.
Yeah, and so perceptive, and he has that rare ability to just articulate stuff that other people kind of surround or hint at, or maybe get a little bit, but don't totally get. And there's people like, well, he really gets Philly. He is Philly. It's more than that. He gets it. I mean, he's from Cleveland, but he is Philadelphia. And he went through, in 2016, people wanted he had a bad year. And he was the first to admit it. Remember that whole, he's too small. They need to get a bigger center. He's getting steamrolled. His technique is off. It was a crisis time for him, and people were down on him. And he kind of he took it to heart, and he remade himself that off season and worked on his technique. He got stronger, and he's played at a insane level, all pro level, the 5 years since. And I think every great Philadelphia athlete has that moment. I mean, we talked about Zach Ertz and the Vontaze Burfict, the block, and and how do you respond to that? And I'll tell you what, any young player who comes to this team is lucky to have Jason Kelce there to kind of articulate this stuff and tell them, look, this can be a tough town if you let it, but it's up to you to address your faults, because everybody has them, and to do what you have to win these people over. And that's work hard, be committed to what you're doing. Don't make excuses, be accountable, and bust it to first base. If you're a baseball player, all you have to do to be loved in this town, if you're a baseball player, is bust it to first base. Run like hell to first base, and they'll love you. I'm going to miss that guy so much, man. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is his last year. I kind of figure it will be. Whenever it is, I just can't imagine this team without Jason Kelce. I just they're gonna have to change their name. They can't even be the Eagles anymore. It's hard to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, well, that day is not too far in the future, I wouldn't think. But
from
just
a football
aside from
standpoint and just a personality standpoint,
What do you mean?
Well, just the person. I mean, he's such a symbol of the organization, and the picture of him at the art museum with the mummers and the speech that he made, which paraphrased a column I wrote, which he later admitted. But that's one of the most indelible images, in sports history in the city, but also just the player he is. I mean, it's hard to imagine that somebody else is going to play center for this team.
Yeah, I want to get beyond Kelce saying it and get to his message, because obviously he had the wisdom and the experience to say it, but there's a lot of truth in it. And he was asked within the frame of talking about Zach Ertz and, guys who are loved in the city. And he did mention that it helps to be good, which is true. It
helps to catch the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it does. It helps to be a good player. And I've had this conversation, I'm sure you have too, with players, sitting in the locker room, like, what does it take to be liked in this city? It ain't hard. I mean, there are a few things you got to do, and I thought Kelce did a really nice job of laying it out. And it was funny because he didn't want to mention Ben Simmons at first, but it was obvious that that's kind of what is on the front of all of our minds here. And it's just, I think the fan base is really smart about knowing if you're giving it your all and if you're trying your best. Like if you're, a player who is playing beyond their means, I think for the most part, they kind of accept it unless you're forced into a bigger role than you deserve. I'm trying to think, like Jalen Mills was a player who I think everyone really liked in the beginning because he's playing outside of his means. But then when he needed to be the guy, he started getting frustrated because
I think Alex Singleton's an example of that.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair one too. A guy who's, great story. Everyone loves him because he works hard. And then sometimes maybe he has too big of a role and then it flips a little bit. But there are moments where guys just have to realize that. And I thought one of the things Kelce said that wasn't the most quotable, but it was one of the more interesting things, is that the criticism that is baseless doesn't really get to athletes. It's the criticism that they know is true and that for whatever reason they can't accept and use that. That's the stuff that bothers them. And I think that's really true. Ben Simmons is such an easy example, but I don't think he would care about people saying, if people said he couldn't play defense, he'd be like, well, that's like, of course I can play defense. But when people say you haven't tried to learn how to shoot or you haven't made an effort to do it, and that's just the easiest and most forefront example. But I think that does get the players more, and it makes sense that it would get to them more.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That was something I'd never really thought about. But It's definitely true. And, Jason speaks from experience and being in that locker room for 11 years. It's absolutely true. Every player is going to get criticized. I mean, I can't think of a guy. I mean, Doc got, Reggie White, there's guys, everybody gets criticized at some point. And, this is a tough town from the standpoint, just because it's the fifth largest market. So there's going to be more fans, more media, just by definition. I mean, there's certain cities. It's an old city where the team's been here for almost a century, which isn't the case in a lot of, Western and Southern markets. I mean, the old time teams are in the Rust Belt and, Boston, Chicago, and in between, Green Bay, Detroit. I mean, those are the markets where I think it's the fans are the toughest. And if you don't perform, if the effort isn't there, you're going to get called out on it. And I don't know if that's true more anywhere than here.
Yeah. And accountability, he brought up a good point that accountability matters, like outside of the realm of fans. Like accountability matters for your teammates, it matters for coaches, but it transfers to the people you're playing in front of and for. And you think to the Super Bowl team, like the most beloved guys on that team went through it here at one point. If it was Kelce, if it was Zach Ertz, Brandon Graham, Nick Foles, like all those guys were criticized pretty heavily at some point.
Patrick Robinson,
Patrick Robinson. I mean, you go down the list, and that kind of falls in line with Kelce's speech a little bit, but all those guys went through it, maybe with the exception of like a Fletcher Cox. There were a few maybe exceptions there, but all those guys got criticized at some point. And
I think that was part of the personality of that team.
Yeah.
Was that
but it's such an easy thing to accomplish. It's like, be better. Just try to be better, work on improving. If you're talented, I think that's what frustrates any fan base really more than anything else, is like when you have a talented player that's not getting the most out of that talent. Everyone watching the game would like to be on that field if they had that set of skills or that athleticism. And when they don't think that you're putting the work in to maximize it, it pisses them off, and it should.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really helps explain why some players are popular here and some aren't. And there's some really, really good players that were never popular, and some really mediocre or average players that were. And that's why.
Yeah, it was a really interesting talk with Jason Kelce. I'll miss him whenever he's gone too. But let's move on to a few updates here. Dallas Goedert off the COVID-19 list, certainly a good sign in practice on Thursday, but he was out there doing some conditioning. It looks like they're going to ramp him up. Lane Johnson has been back for the last 2 days practicing. Looks like there's a chance he's going to play on Sunday. Anthony Harris returned to practice on Thursday with the old hands injuries too, both wrapped up. Looks like maybe he's going to try to play. Out of all that, what's the biggest takeaway for you?
Biggest takeaway, Goddard better play because, the other guy's not here anymore.
No, Tyree Jackson's here.
Who's that?
Tyree Jackson's here. He's the other guy, right? Jack
Stoll. Obviously, they sound really high on Tyree Jackson. We'll see. He had a good summer. He had a good training camp, but I'm not sure all the hype is really warranted. We'll see. I mean, we'll see what kind of player he is. I mean, he's a converted quarterback who had a good training camp. So to think he can come in and make a big impact, the Eagles seem to be hoping for that.
I already booked my flight to Canton for 2035. Should I cancel that?
That's a great airport, by the way. Canton, Akron. Great little airport.
Never been.
That's a good one. We'll see. I want to see him play. But I think the expectations might be the way Howie talked the other day, it's like this guy's just going to come in and replace Zach Ertz. So we'll see. I mean, he's a good kid. He wants to do well. Obviously, he caught everything thrown his way over the summer, but it's a big leap from a good training camp to being a player. We know that. And then as far as Lane goes, I think, and Rodney McLeod talked about this on Wednesday, it's important to remember that just because Lane is back and is back with the team, after missing 3 games. It doesn't mean, and I'm not a mental health expert, but he's not, doesn't mean he's cured or better. It doesn't work that way. This is something he's going to be dealing with. And, I think we learned with Brandon Brooks. I mean, it's an ongoing battle. And, Brandon missed another game like the next year after his initial. So, I think he's got a really good support system on his team. Everybody thinks the world of Lane. The whole team has his back. They're all looking out for him. And we all hope that, he comes back and plays at a high level, but the main thing is that he's okay. And his mental health is something he's going to be working on. So just important to remember that it's not like he's back, that's all gone. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I think that's important. And that's a good point about Brandon Brooks is there hadn't been an episode, at least that we knew about, for a while. And then all of a sudden, I think it was after he got his contract, it kind of triggered it. Yeah. And he missed the next game or a couple of games after that because he hadn't played well. So that's important to know that hopefully they do have Lane back on Sunday. If not, if he's not ready, he did miss 3 games. Maybe physically he's not ready. Maybe it's mentally he's not ready. But if he's not, then they have to go with the line they showed previously with Mailata at right tackle and Dillard at left tackle. Not ideal, but at least they have some depth there to get by if that is the case.
I'm still driving that Driscoll at right tackle, Herbie at right guard, Mailata at left tackle train, but I don't think that'll happen.
I don't know. You really got off the Dillard train after 1 game. I don't get it. He had one
I don't know,
below average game, and now you're off of Dillard.
It's not just that. I just think Mailata's better at left tackle and right tackle. So
he is, but I think Driscoll's better than Herbig.
But you can hide a guard better. You can hide a tackle. I mean, I just think you're stronger with Mailata, Dickerson, Kelce, Herbig, Driscoll than Dillard, Dickerson, Kelce, Driscoll, Mailata.
I disagree. We can agree to disagree on that one. Hopefully they won't even need to worry about it, and Lane will be fine and he can play. What else is there? Oh, Kayvon Wallace. He's one that we haven't talked about, but his practice. It's funny that Tyree Jackson's been the bigger of those 2 names when Kayvon's actually played before. But Kayvon Wallace, he had a separated shoulder. He's missed 3 games. His practice window has started already. He could be a big, important piece to this game because Anthony Harris has the 2-hand injuries. They might need Kayvon in this game, and he might get the call up here.
Is that a brewery? 2 hands brewery, I believe.
There's a left hand brewery. Left hand milk stout's a very good beer.
Okay, keep that in mind.
I'm not a big stout guy, but it's good.
I'm not a big stout guy. I'm just a flat out IPA guy. I'm sorry. I'm just unabashed IPA guy. What we're talking about.
I am too. And I want to point out that I'm drinking iced tea. It looks like, now that you mention it, I realize this probably looks like I'm drinking an IPA, but it is iced tea, peach iced tea.
Oh, God. How can you do that? It's a perfectly good iced tea. Peach?
Yeah.
It's nasty. Just nasty. Kayvon, safety is a position that's got to sort itself out. And against this offense, they better be ready because they're going to be asking a lot of their safeties Sunday afternoon. Hey, score big with the AAA Eagles MVP membership. Along with the superb roadside assistance and discounts you've come to expect from AAA, get exclusive Eagles-related perks. For details, visit AAA.com/Eagles.
Joining us now on the Eagle Eye podcast brought to you by Nissan. As he does, I want to say every week, but we missed you last week, Ray, because of the short week before the Bucks game. How are you?
Doing good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing well. Did you enjoy a weekend of watching other football and not this team?
I was actually putting the finishing touches on Tommy and me down in Wilmington. So
Nice.
So that's what I spent most of my time at the stage, watching football on the stage as opposed to football on the field. So I was busy, but I've tried to play catch up. I try to do a little scouting of the Las Vegas. I still have trouble getting my arms around the Las Vegas Raiders, but I went back and rewatched that game.
I know how. I'm just going to say I know how time consuming it is from the work I did on J-Jaw and me. So I just know what a challenge it can be to find the time to work on a project like that.
Yes, it is. It is. It's very challenging. But we're back in we're back in full harness now.
That's great. So Ray, it's been so long now since the Bucks game, but we haven't talked to you about it. We won't spend too much time on it, but what were your takeaways? The score was close, but it didn't feel like a very close game.
No, I didn't think at all. I was a little bit surprised that in its immediate aftermath, there were people who were trying to make a case for the fact that, and I guess they were bettors because you've got the 7 points you won your bet. Maybe that had something to do with it. But I was surprised how many people said, "Hey, listen, it was 6 points. They hung right in there. They came back in the fourth quarter." And to me, it looked like a game where the Buccaneers almost could have named the score. It looked to me like their interest level and their energy level was about what you would have gotten in a Thursday practice. I mean, it was like they just kind of said, all right, we got this game on the schedule. Let's go to Philly. Let's play. Let's get the win, and let's get on the plane and come home. There wasn't a whole lot of joy in it. If you saw Arians' press conference, if you saw Brady's press conference, it was just kind of okay, we got this one behind us, and now let's move on. I mean, they had four drives of 70-plus yards. They kind of moved the ball whenever they wanted to. At the end of the game, with 5:54 to go, the Eagles are now within one score, and Bucs offense comes on the field. And I said to Barrett Brooks, we were watching the game together, I said, do you feel like the Eagles are going to get the ball back? And he said, nah. I said, no, neither do I. I mean, I didn't think the Bucs were going to score because they didn't have to, but I felt no question. Brady's just going to walk them down the field, bleed down the clock, and that's going to be the end of the game. I mean, even though the score looks pretty close, I mean, to me, it seemed like the Bucs were pretty much in charge all the way.
Yeah, it was interesting watching Byron Leftwich call plays. That was my biggest takeaway: is you have the greatest quarterback ever, 7-time Super Bowl winner, and you're running the ball 30 times.
Right.
You're running a balanced attack. Those first two drives, they came out and went down the field twice in a row, like you alluded to. And on both of those drives, Leonard Fournette was as big a part of those drives as Tom Brady was. I mean, he was, 4, 5, 6 carries per drive.
No question.
If you have Tom Brady and you're committed to running the ball and balancing the attack, what does that say about having Jalen Hurts and not balancing the attack?
I thought exactly the same thing. I mean, not only do you have the greatest quarterback ever to play, but you have 3 receivers who all are on pace to be 1,000-yard receivers. I mean, it's not like you got a bunch of receivers that aren't very good. I mean, you got 3 really good receivers who are all a big part of the offense, but they never lose sight of the fact that running the ball is still an important part of it. I mean, how many plays, how many drives, how many series started off with Brady just turning around, handing it to Fournette, and he'd get his 4 yards, and now it's 2nd and 6, and here we go, and there was just a rhythm to what they were doing, and everybody was involved, and the running game was a big part of it. So, yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Reuben. I was thinking if, as a play caller, if you got Tom Brady at quarterback and you got receivers like Evans and Godwin and Antonio Brown out there, but you still think that you can run the ball 31 times, and that's part of the formula to win a game, then to me, that's ample evidence for the Eagles coaching staff to, I think you guys can learn a little something from this. I mean, they are merely the world champions.
That was my biggest takeaway from the game, was just the contrast in the approach on offense.
It was unavoidable. It was really unavoidable. I mean, if you were watching the game that way, I don't know how you couldn't think that. I mean, because the Eagles were so over the top the other way. I mean, that whole first half play calling that you could get to halftime, and there's one handoff to Miles Sanders. I don't know if there was a single play where the quarterback was under center. It was to have that be one team's offense and the Super Bowl champs running a different kind of offense with the greatest quarterback of all time, to me, made a pretty strong argument that I think one team has it right and the other team has it wrong.
And my favorite play from that game, my favorite moment was when he ran in the third quarter and fans gave a standing ovation for a 5-yard run just because he actually did it. We'll see if it gets through. I mean, this Raiders game, they might have a chance to run against this team as we kind of move to Las Vegas here. Ray, they can run against this team if they want to, right?
Seems to. I mean, run defense is not the Raiders' forte. Although I do believe I heard, at least as of yesterday, they thought that they were going to get Jonathan Hankins back in the defensive line, who's, pretty good, probably their best interior run stuffer. But, I mean, they're not a team that's going to shut down the run. That's not really what they are. And so, yeah, I think is the opportunity there for the Eagles to run the ball successfully? Yeah, I think it is. I do think it is. And most of all, I think you've got two guys in Sanders and Gainwell that are good players. I always thought that as a coaching staff, one of the things you have to do is you just have to assess your personnel. And if you're an offensive staff, you try to identify who are my better playmakers here. And if you identify them, you say, okay, these are the guys we want to get the ball to. That's pretty ABC of offense, I think. And when I look at the offense here, I would certainly identify Sanders and Gainwell as two of my better playmakers. So the idea that you don't really incorporate them in the game once the game begins seems to me to be pretty counterproductive. I hope that I don't expect the media or the fans to necessarily influence the coaches to go back and run the ball more. That's not our job, nor should they necessarily listen to the fans in terms of putting their offense together. But they, as a staff, should certainly recognize, exactly the thing that Reuben was talking about. When you see the way Tampa Bay plays and the success that they have with it, I mean, if you're the coaching staff here, if you're the offensive staff, I mean, you got to take a step back and say, you know what, I think we really do have to kind of reassess what we're doing. And when I saw a couple of the press conferences this week, the offensive coordinator and the head coach both kind of addressed the idea that, yeah, I think we need to run the ball more. Well, yeah, I think you do too.
Yeah, it was interesting, and we'll see if they do. The Raiders are coming off what was a pretty emotional win, I'm guessing, for them. They lose their head coach their head coach resigned. He didn't get fired. And then they have an interim, and we know that can be an emotional time for a team. I thought they handled it really well on the field. I thought they played a really good game against Denver. Did you have a chance to watch that, Ray? And what did you think of the Raiders? I
thought they played very well. I don't think they're a great team. I think their offensive line is pedestrian. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's certainly not a strength. But the offense itself looked good. Derek Carr played really well, really well. He had 7 throws of more than 25 yards. I mean, they got that component in their offense really working. And I think that it looks to me, again, judging it from a distance, it looks to me that the partnership of he and Greg Olsen is a good one. Greg Olsen was the quarterback coach when Derek Carr was a rookie, and early in his career when he was a really promising young quarterback. And then Olsen went off, and now he's back. And with John Gruden gone, they have really turned the whole offense over to Greg Olsen. And it really seems like it's brought a level of comfort to Derek Carr. I think he has confidence in Olsen. I think Olsen understands exactly what Carr's strengths are and kind of what he's thinking on the field, what he wants to do. And the play calling last week against Denver was very crisp, very on point. Everybody was involved. He didn't complete a ton of passes, but he completed them for big yardage. And he just looked like he was running the offense. Everything just seemed to be really good. Henry Ruggs, who was their first-round draft pick last year, who I think as a rookie was a bit of a disappointment, looks like he's sort of rounding into form now. And he is really a deep threat. I mean, he can really get down the field, and Carr likes to throw it out there to him. So offensively, they were very good. And defensively, that Max Crosby has really come on. And I mean, right now, if you're talking about defensive player of the year, Aaron Donald is always going to be at the top of that discussion, probably should be. But if you look at the way Crosby is playing, and it isn't just one game, it's been most of the year, he's playing at a very, very high level too. So whoever mans that right tackle position, be it Lane Johnson can come back and play, or if it's they need to give him a little more time and it's Jordan Mailata, they're going to have their hands full because Max Crosby is really, really playing well right now.
You brought up Ruggs, and he's such a deep threat. At least the Eagles safeties are playing 40 yards down the field. I guess that's going to be their idea in this game. Is we've seen so many soft zones, but against this team, they can beat you with the deep shot. Does it make sense to keep that going in this game?
Yeah, I fully expect that. I mean, if you look at their offense and you especially look at their game in Denver, you would have to be. I mean, I think Jonathan Gannon is a too high safety kind of guy anyway. I think that's the way he wants to play. And if looking at the tape, he would certainly want to do that here because they're going for the big shot. I mean, they're going for the ball down the field, and they have the guys that can go get it. So I would expect him to play that way. But I also think that within that, he has to do some different things. I think he has to mix it up more. I think they're way too predictable and way too easy for an experienced quarterback to read and take advantage of. So to play a sort of a deep shell kind of defense against this offense probably makes sense. But I think he also has to mix some other things in there too and find a way to take advantage of this offensive line. Because like I said, it's not very good. And if they can get pressure on Derek Carr and really throw off the timing of this passing game, then I think that that's a very important part of trying to win it.
Ray, I want to follow up on Derek Carr because the one number that jumps out at me is 13.1 yards per completion, which is astronomical. And like you said, they've got guys who can run and throws a really accurate, really good deep ball. The Eagles have faced Mahomes, Prescott, and Brady over the last month. It doesn't get any easier. Where do you put Derek Carr in the pantheon of NFL? Is he a top 10 quarterback to you? Is he kind of bubbling right under there? What do you when you look at what he's been able to do this year? I think he's averaging like 325 yards a game. I mean, the numbers are astronomical.
Yeah, they are. And if you do the splits and you look at his performance on third down, it's really amazing. I mean, he right now is the number 2 third down quarterback in the league. I mean, he has been converting third downs one after another and with big plays. I've always been a Derek Carr fan. I think that he's really, really talented. I think he's been caught, like a lot of young quarterbacks, kind of in a bad situation there. I mean, he's been in the league for 8 years, and this is his 5th head coach. So, I mean, it's sort of part and parcel of what the Raiders have been. They've been an organization with a whole lot of turnover and not very much continuity. And I think it's hard for a quarterback to really function in that kind of a situation. So I think that's impacted him in a negative way. But what I'm seeing now, Rube, I think he's kind of getting it back. And I think the return of Greg Olsen and having him be the guy in his ear right now has brought him back to the comfort zone of his earlier days in the league. And the guy I saw playing last Sunday looked very comfortable, very on point, and looked like looked like a guy who was really kind of found his way and was enjoying playing again. I saw the comment. Jacobs, the running back, made the comment this week about somebody asked him how it was on the sidelines out in Denver for this game after everything that had happened, and now John Gruden is gone. What was it like? And Jacob said, I don't know, it just felt good that there was a calm on the sidelines. Everybody seemed kind of composed. He said it was almost quiet. And he didn't call Gruden by name, but I think what he was saying was that everybody just kind of settled down, and there seemed to be a renewed sense of focus and maybe purpose. It looked like the Raiders really kind of rallied. When you go through kind of what a team went through last week with the Raiders, I mean, it can do a couple of different things. It can completely splinter a team and just scuttle them for the year, or it can kind of galvanize them. And I don't know if it's going to be a year-long thing, but certainly last week they looked like a team pulling together and a team that enjoyed playing. And I think the Eagles have to be prepared for that being the kind of team that they're going to see on Sunday.
Well, from somebody who covered John Gruden a long time ago, but I covered John Gruden for 3 years, I can tell you calm was not a word that anybody who played for him ever used. He was I mean, I think there's a point where you can be so intense that it's hard to play free and loose and easy. And I think that's been an issue with a lot of his teams.
I think so too. I mean, I'm sure I probably told you the story, but when he came to Philadelphia, when Ray hired him to make him the offensive coordinator, the boy offensive coordinator back then before anybody knew who he was, the paper, I was working at the Daily News, and they sent me down to write a profile on John. So I went down there and I met with him and I said, hey, I really need to talk to you. I need some time. They want me to do a profile on you. And he kind of made this face and, oh, I don't know. I'm really busy and I don't have time. And I said, look, I promise 30 minutes tops. That's all I'm going to ask for. And he says, all right, 4:00 tomorrow. And I said, okay, see you then. And I turned to walk out and he said, that's 4 a.m. And I started to laugh. I thought he was just playing a joke. It wasn't a joke. I mean, if I wanted to talk to him, I had to be there at 4:00 in the morning. That was my introduction to John Gruden. And I think that that's the way he's always been. And yeah, the idea of relaxed, composed, everything, that's not John. Never was, and I don't think it ever will be.
Was he there at 4 a.m.?
Oh, was he ever? Yes, he was. Yes, he was. He was already working, and he had the playbook open and the film rolling.
Wow. I wanted to run one thing by you. I have an idea for this game for the defense, and I want to get your take on it. I'm looking at their weapons, and I see Darren Waller, and then I remember what Darius Slay did against Travis Kelce. Would you give him that treatment? Would you put Slay on Waller and then say, hey, we're going to be in cover 2 anyway. We'll bracket for Ruggs and prevent a deep ball and let Slay kind of try to take away Waller?
I've actually had the same thought because if they play the 2 safeties the way I think they're going to play them, have them account for the deep ball, and have a corner play a corner on the tight end, because the Eagles have had fairly good success against the tight ends this year already. I mean, Kelce. I mean, they lost to Kansas City, but Kelce didn't kill him. I could see that. I could see that as a strategy. I just don't know if they can do any one thing for 60 minutes. I think that they have to try different things. I think they have to try and get a little bit of a tactical advantage that maybe confuse the quarterback, maybe lead him into misreading a coverage, making a mistake, turning the ball over. One of the things that bothers me really about both sides of the ball here is there's nothing that you would call disguise on anything they do. Certainly not on the offense. I mean, they run the same formations. They've used very little motion. There's nothing that makes the defense have to think after the Eagles break the huddle and come to the line of scrimmage. There's nothing they have to react to. It's everything they expected. It's right there. It's just a case of making the play. I think you're really losing something if you don't make the defense kind of react, because you always can have the chance of them making a mental mistake and giving you a big play. Defensively, the same way. I think if you sort of sit in the kinds of predictable defenses that they have been in, and they have been, again, I think you make it way too, offense and defenses in this league, the guys you're playing against, are far too sophisticated to be able to do that. I mean, if you're the Ray Lewis Ravens, yeah, you can just stay in that one set and you don't care what anybody does, because once the ball's snapped, you're going to kill them. But the Eagles are far from that. I think they need to do more in terms of making both offensive and defensive opponents think and react to what they're doing and try and gain that little bit of an edge even before the ball's snapped.
Are you telling me Ray Lewis and Eric Wilson aren't on the same plane, Roy?
I wouldn't mention them in the same breath. No, I would not. Or within
Ray.
the same thought.
Yeah, I almost cringed when I said it there. But early prediction: who do you got in this game?
I was on with Angelo this morning, so I had to go on the record. I picked the Raiders. I think it is a winnable game. But based on what I saw last week, looking at the Raiders tape and then having seen the Eagles one, I just can't pick the Eagles to beat them right now. The Raiders are 4-2, and the Raiders are tied for first place in that division. And even for everything that has gone sideways out there, they're still thinking about being a playoff team, and they have some good players. And like I said, I thought that they looked to me to be a team that was really energized and focused last week. Now, I don't know if that's going to be true for the remainder of the season, but I think for right now they are. And Randy, I'm not sure what the Eagles are right now, frankly, after seeing what I saw in the Tampa Bay game. I mean, they could have lost 5 in a row if it wasn't for the block punt in Carolina. So I just can't. Right now, I think the Raiders are a team that kind of have it going a little bit, and the Eagles are going to have to show me before I pick them.
Ray, I don't know if Dave mentioned to you next week, we're going to record the podcast at 4 a.m. So,
well, I'm practiced at that. I can do that.
All right, Ray. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next week.
At Nissan, we just made your choice for a new car an easier one than ever with our most exciting and fuel-efficient lineup. The choice is all yours. Now get great offers across our full line. Shop your local Nissan store today at nissanusa.com.
Perfect pause there. Didn't draw it out too much. Wasn't too quick. Hit it. It was very good.
I tried to stay within myself.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Just let the offense run itself. Don't try to do too much.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you to Ray, as always, for stopping by and chatting with us. We thought we'd have some fun in this last segment. We talked about Jason Kelce, and you and I walked away from that press conference today thinking, is he the best ever? Like, is he the best, most quotable athlete? We're talking just quotes, just for our own selfish sake. Is he the best ever? He's on a short list. And we started tossing back and forth some names. Who else is on that list for you?
Don Looney was really good. No, he was the guy who led the NFL in receiving in 1938. No, for me, the best ever starts with Eric Allen and Seth Joyner, our colleague Seth Joyner. What Jason Kelce gave us today, Seth would give you twice a day. Like back in the day, the locker room was open before practice and after practice, and Seth would hold court. And it was he was. I mean, you can see how passionate he is watching him on and analytical and thoughtful and all those things. That's what goes into being a good quote. But he was the same way as a player. But the difference was, like, most athletes who become analysts start criticizing once they're an analyst. Seth did it when he was a player. He never held back. He would rip a teammate if he wasn't playing well enough, if he was struggling, if the effort wasn't there. Seth was just so perceptive, and I think he's the best ever. I think Eric Allen is second, just from a standpoint of analyzing what was happening on the field and big picture stuff. I put those two and Jason Kelce probably in the top group, along with Malcolm
let's go
and Michael Vick.
Real quick. Let's do that. I just want to run through some positions. Quarterback, is Mike Vick the best you've been around?
Yeah, Mike Vick would be the best. Yeah.
Nick Foles had his moments.
Yeah, Nick Foles, I mean, he rose to the occasion during the run in 17. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And certainly the day after the Super Bowl, when I unwittingly asked him about how he wants people to, what he wants people to learn from his journey. Next thing I know, that quote's being used on Good Morning America. I was just got to ask him something. But Vic was just so honest and accountable and fun.
And we didn't cover Vic obviously early in his career, so I wonder how much different he was.
Very different. I used to ask him that, and he said, "Yeah, I never talked to anybody when I was in Atlanta." He wasn't highly thought of by the media there, but he was so cooperative. I mean, you could see him in the parking lot and say, "Hey, Mike, I just wanted to ask you about the Raiders second." And he was standing there in the parking lot and talked to you for 20 minutes. Yeah. He was so accessible and so available, and insightful and just the best. And but Foles is up there.
How about running backs? Shady was always fun.
Ricky was great when he wanted to be, but he just didn't talk very often. Mm-hmm. Deuce was the same way, and Westbrook. All those guys, none of those guys talked. Like Westbrook was a great quote, but you might talk to him like 3-4 times a year. He just wasn't into doing interviews. Keith Byers was tremendous. He's probably the best running back quote.
Okay.
Shady was up there, but Shady didn't talk all that much either. He would talk to me like, Rube, meet me in the hallway, that kind of thing. I'll give you the good stuff. But Keith Byers is probably the best. He was a quote machine back then.
Does Jay Ajayi get a little extra point for the accent?
I love that accent. Yeah,
he would lay it on real thick when there were British reporters in the house.
He would. Yeah. He did a little extra. I mean, he was, Zangaro was a good quote. He didn't really talk all that much, but he was.
That's true.
He was a pretty good quote. I'm trying to think running backs back in the day. Heath Sherman was probably the worst. But yeah, I'd go with Byers and then Shady.
Okay. And we apologize for those of you who don't care about this. This is a little self-serving, but we're going to do it anyway. How about receiver? The one that comes to mind for me is Jordan Matthews.
Yeah, he was probably the best as far as pure content, but you want to also match up like ability. And he was a good player the first few years. He was almost like he would just talk too much. Like it was almost like, all right, I got the good stuff, just stop talking. Like if for pure volume. But yeah, I mean, he was a very thoughtful, perceptive, still is guy. I thought Deshaun was great when he wanted to be. Deshaun was never afraid of saying, I want to be a Hall of Famer. I want to be the best receiver in the league. I've done this, and this, but I want to do more. I mean, he was pretty honest and open.
Some guys don't want to talk about themselves. He never had a problem doing that.
That was never an issue with D-Jack. Macklin was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Macklin was good. Mike Quick was kind of quiet. They just haven't had that many good receivers over the years. Freddie Mitchell was a great interview, but he never caught any passes.
Well, that's what we're talking about, though. I mean,
you have to have at least some level of, like Nate Brown was a great quote, but you're not going to put him on the list because it's like getting a Gold Glove award in baseball. Like if you're the best defensive shortstop, but you hit 160, they're not giving you the Gold Glove. It's based on fielding, but you also have to be a legitimate player to get it.
I like that you've made your own rules for this. We've said rule. It's the best, most quotable, and you're like, no, but it's not the most quotable. It's the most quotable within these guidelines that are arbitrary and only in my mind.
Being like a legitimate player, that's all. Yeah,
okay.
Being a legitimate player.
Fair.
I'm going to think about that because I think we do better than Jordan Matthews. I'm going to say Deshaun until I think of someone else.
No, well, Jordan was a better quote than Deshaun.
Yeah, but if Deshaun says, I want to be a Hall of Famer, that's a better quote than Jordan talking for 82 minutes about his calf injury. So that's what I mean about like.
But he was the leading receiver on this team for 3 years, and he was the most.
He was, but Deshaun's also the greatest deep threat in the history of the game. So when he says something, there's just a little more cachet there.
I get it, but that's not what this is. You're changing the rules here. I don't like.
No, I'm not. I just think. Because you have to look at the content, and like if you sit down with Deshaun and he starts talking about how he's motivated and driven by being a Hall of Famer, there's nothing Jordan Matthews can say to like match that,
I don't know. When Jordan Matthews came back from Buffalo and said he had a kid because there was nothing else up there to do.
Yeah, he did say that. Yeah.
How about offensive line? We mentioned Kelce. This team has quite a few. Now, I mean, Lane's been very good. Brendan Brooks has been excellent at times.
The two best ever for me were, Kelce, but also Ron Heller, who was the right tackle in the late 80s and early 90s. He was incredible. He was phenomenal. And he would just, he would just go on for 20, 30 minutes, just the state of the universe and big picture stuff. But then the Eagles signed Jim McMahon, and they became best friends. And then Heller never talked to us again. he was such a jerk. But who was incredible was Joe Conwell, another right tackle in the mid 80s. Joe Conwell's brother's Tommy Conwell, the great Philly musician who I actually got to perform with at Wing Bowl in 2009. But Joe Conwell was one of the all-time greats. And I had this conversation, I think during training camp with Spadaro, because back then he was actually a legitimate news reporter, beat writer for the Westchester Daily Local. So we were trying to think of some of these guys, but Heller and Conwell were great, but Kelce's unparalleled, unmatched, unrivaled.
Yeah, and I will say, even though he rarely talked to us, when Jason Peters wanted to,
Yeah.
he could be pretty good. And his words obviously carried a ton of weight.
Oh, now that matters.
Well, because you've changed the rules, so now I have to
No,
abide
it's just,
by.
those are my rules for me picking the guy. That's
Okay,
all.
well, I'll give you Jason Peters then. You
He
could
was
have
great.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, he was good.
Defensive line. Who you got there?
Jerome Brown
Okay.
was hilarious. You never knew what he was going to say. Most of what he said was unprintable, but he was funny as hell. I'm trying to think of some of my favorite Jerome Brown quotes, and I can't repeat them. But if you wanted to find out, ask about the other team's offensive line, he wasn't the guy you went to, but yeah, I didn't prepare for this defensive line. Reggie was hard to get. He didn't say much. Clyde Simmons was very quiet, didn't say a lot. Andy Harmon was a great player, but he was kind of quiet. I don't know.
Hugh and Trent, how were they?
Oh, Hugh was great. Trent was okay. He was okay, but yeah, Hugh Douglas was phenomenal. He might be the best on there, and he was another guy you had to censor. He was at the game Thursday night. It was great to see him. He stopped by he was just wandering by the WIP booth. We grabbed him and brought him in. He was just wandering around the Head House Plaza. We just found him. It was good to see him, but he'd be at the top of the list. What are you thinking? Like recent years?
I mean, BG talks a lot. I think his words have kind of lost meaning just because he's so visible and talks all the time. But he's fun to talk to, and he brings energy to that too.
Yeah, very honest guy and really good guy to talk to for the real pulse of the team. He always has a good sense.
Chris Long was great.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, which now you see with his podcast, he's a very good talker.
There are no other podcasts. This is the only one. But yeah, he's up there.
How about linebacker? You mentioned Seth.
Seth was,
was good. Recent years, Jordan Hicks was very good.
He was. And I'll tell you what, I remember discovering that Ike Reese was really talkative back in '98. He was only a special teamer. He was a linebacker by trade. He didn't really play defense. But I remember there was like one day after a game and there weren't many guys in the locker room. And I asked him a question about the game. And he's like, gives me all this incredible stuff for like 8 minutes. Wow, this guy's incredible. He's exactly like he is now on the radio, just insightful and passionate and observant. And, but for like a year and a half, I had Ike to myself because nobody else realized what a great interview he was. But people quickly caught on and he went into the media and is doing a terrific job. But he was always really good. So I still think Seth is probably the best ever. Kelce's close. But I mean, Seth would say anything. He had no filters. I mean, he called his head coach a puppet. He called Rich Kotite a puppet, the owner's puppet. I mean, who does that?
Not many. I don't think there's any others recently. Maybe Kiko you put in that mix. All right, how about secondary? They've had some good guys in the secondary.
Secondary is always really, really talkative. Yeah.
You mentioned EA. Recent years, I mean, Malcolm Jenkins was, what it was when I was talking to Zach Brown about this, Malcolm Jenkins could go from topic to topic as smooth as anyone. You want to talk about, the wide receiver screen that the Bucs are running on Sunday, fine. Then you want to flip it to world affairs, and he just without hesitation back and forth. Yeah. And he'll sit there and talk. And you know what? He kind of became a big face of a movement for a while. And I think he realized that he had taken on that role and he had to stand there and answer any question about that came his way.
Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, it was a lot on his plate there. He was doing a lot of national stuff just because that was the role he was thrust into just by being so well-spoken and perceptive about a lot of issues. Wes Hopkins, terrific. Andre Waters, terrific. Really, that whole group, Terry Hogue, all those guys were really, really good quotes. Rodney's good. Rodney's fine. Good. He's up there.
Nnamdi
was fantastic.
Yeah.
I had some great talks with Nnamdi about life and the world and the universe, and as long as I didn't ask him about like football, we got along great. But he's one of my favorite guys. I mean, he obviously wasn't the same player when he got here, but fascinating dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Jalen Mills actually ended up being a pretty good one.
He was. Yeah, he wasn't bad.
How was Troy?
Oh, Troy is phenomenal. Yeah, that's a great name. He's in my top 10 all time. Okay. Troy was, because Troy, and you know what? Lito was really good too. Sheldon was a little quieter, but he would give you some good stuff. But Lito was terrific.
Oh, we didn't mention Doc.
Yeah, Doc was, Doc was an all-timer. See, this is what happens when I don't do any prep. Just kind of trying to think of names for the last 35 years. Doc was one of a kind just because he did interviews the same way he played. Like he would put so much passion into it. And like, you could look at his eyes and be like, he was so intense when he did interviews.
Like, would you walk away like, I'm going to go write the hell out of this story?
I'm going to go attack this story. And the thing about Doc, and this isn't true of a whole lot of players at his level, Hall of Famers, he was so accessible. And, the first thing he would do if you're a beat writer, he'd give you a cell phone. If you need anything, don't call me every night, but if you need something, this is how you reach me. Text me, I'll call you back if I can. He was just always available. He talked every day before, after practice, always at his locker after games, win or loss. Just incredibly accountable. And he knew everybody's name. I mean, he's just one of the best guys ever. I love that dude. And he's still the same way. I mean, if you need something answered, you call Doc, he'll give you a good answer. He's one of a kind. And he just gets so emotional. I remember when he came back, I guess I don't know if it was when they retired his number or it was probably when they put him in the Eagles Hall of Fame. And he was doing an interview in the NovaCare in that room where we always talked to where we used to talk to Howie over by the entrance, that like conference room.
Oh yeah.
We did the pre-draft sessions in there every year. And Doc's in there. And by now, I mean, what was his last year here? 2008. So it's probably like 8 years later. And somebody asked him about, the Eagles, how things fell apart after 2008. And he was like in tears. Like he's just like talking about it. It's like almost a decade later. And he's just talking about how emotional it was and how, he still hasn't gotten over it. He still blames the organization. I mean, he is, God, we're so lucky to have just gotten to know these people and talk to them and I hope fans appreciate just how honest, like these guys we've mentioned, how honest and open they are and sharing their thoughts and their opinions. And yeah, it's what makes this job so much fun is the personalities.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for indulging us.
We didn't do punters. Landetta was the best.
Okay. Kicker. You got to do a kicker?
Kickers. Akers. Yeah. Akers was terrific.
All right. We got to stop there, right?
Yeah.
Dorenbos, we'll give Dorenbos a shout out as the long snapper on our all quotable team. Snapper. Thanks for listening to that. If you did, if you didn't like it, sorry, but we wanted to do that. Thank you to Ray Didinger for joining us. That was great stuff. If you enjoy the podcast, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on
Anyone
YouTube,
who's still listening
please
enjoys
click
the podcast.
The like button and subscribe there as well. That's it. We'll talk to you guys after the game on Sunday. For Reuben, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye, presented by Nissan. Take care.